إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد, we start in the name of Allah the Most High, and we send peace and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, and all those who follow his way until the end of time. Ameen. When we look at our lives and our journeys towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we recognize that they are truly journeys. And those journeys will cover many different experiences, many different circumstances in our lives. And yet all throughout it, we're always having this opportunity wherein we can turn back to Allah. And really that's the beginning of the whole experience of our relationship with God, is to turn back to Him. So we may go through any number of different ta'alas. That one of the people of spirituality, they said, when you knock on the door and you keep knocking on the door, then eventually you hope that it will be answered. Right? So if you keep knocking on the door, you keep knocking on the door, keep knocking on the door, eventually someone's going to open the door. And one of the people, they responded to this statement and they said, you know, what are you talking about? There's no door. Right? When it comes to Allah, there's no door. It's not that I'm praying my prayer and I'm knocking and I'm trying to get in and I'm knocking and I'm hoping that eventually Allah will open the door so that I can come to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. But rather, that relationship is always open. All it takes is for the person to decide to turn back. And when they decide to turn back, then they find Allah right there, waiting for them, and to answer their prayers, and to seek His help subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that we go through. And when we go on that journey then, and we make that turn, we must recognize that with all things, there are things that will help us on the journey, and there are things that will hurt us on the journey. And today we just want to focus on three of the foundations of those things that will help us. And these three foundations we find in the story of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in the beginning of the revelation. Because what we find in the beginning of the revelation is very particular, which is that you have the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam living in Mecca, and he is yearning for God. And even before the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's revelation began, there were people in Mecca and around Mecca who were similar to him, who wanted to worship God and who wanted to know God, but they weren't sure of the particulars of how to do that. And so the Prophet ﷺ used to have a habit of going to the cave and reflecting in the cave close to outside of Mecca, the lot of Iraq. And he would go there and he would spend time and he would reflect and he would worship and he would look at the Kaaba and he would yearn for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But again, he doesn't know the details. But the beginning is the desire to come to Him. And as I said before, with this turning, that's what that desire is. This unsettling feeling inside. Because many of us probably we've experienced that. Or we know people who've experienced that. And sometimes we answer that call and sometimes we don't. But we know when we go about our lives, when we feel deep down inside that I have something, maybe if I'm not having a relationship with Allah, you feel deep down inside, there's something that's missing. There's something that I want. There's something that I'm desiring. And we know that that is really just to know God. And so he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam goes and he begins this journey and he sets the example that he's going to go to the cave and he's going to reflect and he's going to take time out. One of the important lessons that we learn from this is that in our daily lives it's important that we take time out. It's very, very difficult. We live in Southern California. Southern California has its demands as relates to employment, as relates to income, salaries, rent, traffic, all of these other things. They make it very difficult sometimes to take a few moments and reflect. And yet we still must somehow, some way, figure out some way to reflect. Whether that might be, for example, taking advantage of our commutes to work, whether that might be the few moments after we park and we're coming home from work before we go into the house, whether that might be a few moments in the morning when we go to Fajr, whatever it might be. But something has to be there wherein we can take a few moments and reflect. And just really assess what is going on with my life. How am I coming closer to Allah? Am I going further from Allah? How can I rectify this situation? Those moments are extremely valuable moments. One time we were sitting with a brother who was very, very busy. MashaAllah, he had a medical practice and he was also the head of a national organization, and he had children. He was doing all of these things at the same time. And one of the questions that the people put to him was, how is it that you find some time to have a relationship with Allah? Like, how do you find, what do you do? And he said, the only time that I ever find is sometimes when I'm driving. I might look up and I might see the sky, and the sky will just look beautiful, and I'll take that moment to try to connect with Allah and make dua and praise Him and feel that awe in my heart towards Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. But those are just a few moments. Sometimes it's just a moment. But those moments have to be there on a regular basis. So this then becomes the starting point for us going towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then what do we find from the early revelation of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in that regard? We find that three things were revealed to him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The first that's revealed to him, obviously, probably many of us are familiar with, but it's important to just remind ourselves of these things. And he's in the cave and he's worshipping, and the angel Jibreel alayhi salam comes to him and he grabs him and he shakes him until he sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that he basically, all of his energy was gone. He really shook him. It's really difficult. And he told him, Iqra, and he said, Ma ana biqari. He told him, read, and he said, I don't read. Or you could say, it's what is it that I'm supposed to read? What am I doing? What is going on here? And he lets him go, and then he grabs him again, and it repeats itself 3 times. And afterwards, on the 3rd time, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaqa al-insana min 'alaq, and it goes, right? The first 6 verses of the surah. So the Prophet ﷺ has the first revelation then, is a revelation that's commanding him to learn. This is the absolute foundation of our religion. The absolute foundation of our religion is that we learn. And that we learn not just, when we come and we get a reminder, that's not learning. Learning is sitting down and studying and taking a pen out and taking the paper out and taking notes and reviewing it and going through books and going to people of knowledge and diversifying the people that we go to and going over an extended period of time, some level of discipline and some level of learning such that we can increase in our relationship with God. And we can understand what it is that He wants from us and why and who said what and everything else, right? But the first thing the Prophet ﷺ is given is reading. And that reading then, there's a couple things that happen right there. The first is that we see that reading is a reading that's not gonna always be easy. Anyone who's ever studied anything seriously knows that learning is not easy. There's not only an intellectual disciplining that happens in learning, there's also a spiritual disciplining that happens. Because you have to really put in the work. There's no shortcuts. There's no cheating. Like for example, someone wants to memorize the Quran. There's no shortcut to memorizing the Quran. You can go around. You can ask all the people. This office, maybe they have their little method, and this office has their method, and this school has their method, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, every single method is going to ask the same thing from you. It's going to be hours upon hours of effort, and sitting and reviewing and memorizing and reviewing and memorizing and reviewing. Same thing applies to every single area of study. Every single area. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes I think about the Muslims, they're like, it's the value. Sometimes people get into this whole thing. They're memorizing the Quran, they don't understand it, they're memorizing. Is memorization really worth it? Nobody has any problem sending their kid to medical school memorizing huge amounts of information. But when it comes to memorizing something in Islam, everyone's like, what's the purpose? It's complete madness. You memorize a little bit of the Quran at least, put it in your heart. The Prophet ﷺ said that the heart that is without Quran inside of it, it's like a house that's ruined. It's like a house that has nothing in it. It's empty. It's destroyed. It's an abandoned building, right? That's the heart that doesn't have the Quran. But in any case, it's not just about the Quran. It's about the life of the Prophet ﷺ. It's about the body of jurisprudence. It's about works in theology and so on and so forth. But all of these take effort. Because he ﷺ, Jibreel alayhi salam grabbed him and he shook him. And afterwards he said, I didn't have anything left. That's how knowledge is. It shakes the person. And it puts them through, some tough trials and difficulties. And then at the end, there's a blessing that comes from that. On top of it, we see from this early revelation, this verse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Don't just read. And this is the key to learning actually in Islam. Because we don't believe in a purely external existence. We believe in the external, the internal. We believe in the seen and the hidden. We believe all of these things go together. Right? So there's the mind and there's the heart. There's the mind and there's the body. All of them are in balance. So he sallallahu alaihi wasallam is commanded by Allah, and Allah is commanding all the believers thereafter that when you read in the name of Allah. You read for the sake of Allah. You read in a way that is activating the mind, but it's also activating the heart. So I can read organic chemistry and activate the heart. Right? I can read biology and activate the heart, depending on who's writing it. I can read mathematics and activate the heart. I can read history and activate the heart. If I'm doing it in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that will give me a benefit in this life and in the hereafter. Isn't it remarkable that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a man who was unlettered, and his teachings gave birth to the nation that produced so much knowledge. So much knowledge. I mean, if we were to just only the books of tafsir that are printed, not the ones that exist in manuscript form, not the ones that were destroyed when the Mongols destroyed all of the libraries of Baghdad and when all of these things happened. Only the ones that are in print. If we were to take all the books of tafsir and put them in print, they fill the walls. Just tafsir. Forget the life of the Prophet ﷺ and hadith and jurisprudence and history and science and mathematics and chemistry and astronomy and all of these things. And medicine. All of these areas the Muslims contributed to from a messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam who didn't read and write. Because we loved him sallallahu alaihi wasallam and we loved the message that he received. When Allah told them to read, they read. And they did that consistently over time. They didn't only read their phones. Now it's really, for me, every single week it's a sad moment to update. Here's your screen for the week. This is how many hours you spent on the phone every single day, you average this week. And you think, subhanAllah, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, people are like, well, how did you guys have so much time? That's your answer. Every Sunday, that's your answer. 3 hours every single day was different. People didn't have these things. So people were studying and they were putting work in. We're only talking about 10 years. So this is number one, is the knowledge side, right? Number two then, that the Prophet ﷺ is given in this early revelation, is he's given the revelation of Ya ayyuhal muzammil qum al-layla illa qalila. So number one foundation he's given for the journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is knowledge. Second one that he's given is, O you who's wrapped in garments, stand in the night, except the living. So this then indicates the importance of the worship. This indicates the importance of putting in the effort spiritually, to fast, to pray, to read the Quran, to make dua, to give charity. All of these things are acts of worship, right? And this worship foundation has to be there. The Prophet ﷺ, the night prayer was obligatory upon him for his whole life. Not just the beginning period where the night prayer, all of the Muslims used to engage in the night prayer in the beginning period. Then when the Isra and Mi'raj happened, and the 5 daily prayers became mandatory, then the night prayer became not required for all of the Muslims, but it remained for the Prophet ﷺ that he prayed in the night. Because that's his zad. That's his provision for what he does in the day. In the same surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, إِنَّ لَكَ فِي النَّهَارِ سَبْحًا طَوِيلًا. That in the daytime you have a big struggle. In modern Arabic, it's the same word that's used for swimming. You imagine when you're swimming and you just, like imagine swimming a long distance. Someone gets on the shore, they go to Redondo Beach, they jump in the water and they swim to Catalina. It's a long swim, right? They have sabah tawila. It's a difficult task that Prophet ﷺ has. I'm not saying that's the exact, this is modern, but it's a difficult task that the Prophet ﷺ has. So what does he have to do? He has to pray in the night. This is what he's being told. Right? It's the prayer in the night that's giving him the ability to do what he has to do during the day. And that's why his wife told him, radiallahu anha, he used to wake in the middle of the night and he would just pray and he would pray and he would pray. And she would tell him, why don't you take some time to rest? And he told her, radiallahu anha, he told her, Ya Khadija, the time for rest is over. The rest time is gone. Now is the time of carrying the message. I have a responsibility to deliver this message. I have a responsibility to teach the people, to be there for the people, to show them the theory of the religion, to show them the practice of the religion. What does it mean to actually do this thing in the actual world around us? And he ﷺ was the most amazing person that ever delivered that responsibility. That's why one of the things they say about the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, Imam al-Qarafi, rahimahullah, he said, لَوْ لَمْ يَكُنْ لِرَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ مُعْجِزَةٌ إِلَّا أَصْحَابَهُ لَكَفَوْهُ بِإِثْبَاتِ نُبُوَّتِهِ. He said, radiallahu anhu, that if the Prophet ﷺ had no miracle other than his companions, it would have been sufficient to establish his prophethood. That's how much he taught these people. That's how much effort he put in during the day and during the night. That if all we had was Abu Bakr and Omar and Uthman and Ali and Abdullah ibn Saud and Mu'adh ibn Jabal and so on and so forth, radiallahu anhum ajma'in, if that's all we had, we would say this was a messenger of God. Because nobody else would be able to produce people like this. to take them from their word and put them to this level that they were at. So number two then that they're given, he's given is the second one, which is the spiritual side. So number one foundation the revelation gives is you must learn. You must get knowledge. The second side that the revelation gives is you must practice that knowledge and worship. Not just practice that knowledge in teaching and everything else, but practice that knowledge in the sense that that knowledge will inspire the person to have a closer relationship with God. And then the third, we'll talk about in the second half of the khutbah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له أشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد عباد الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. I remind myself and everyone to have God consciousness in all affairs. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we were saying, he gives us the example of what it means to journey to Allah. That first he goes to the cave, which is the intention, which is the act of actually physically and externally and internally turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then in that initial revelation that Allah reveals, we get three foundations for how to do that. The first one is an Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, read in the name of your Lord who created. Now the emphasis on knowledge and learning. The second one that we have then in the second revelation that's revealed is Ya ayyuhal muzammil qum al-layla illa qalila. O you who's wrapped in garments, stand in the night except a little bit. So then you have the emphasis on spirituality and on worship. And the third thing that's revealed to the Prophet ﷺ is Ya ayyuhal mudaththir qum fa'anzir. O you who's wrapped again, stand and warn. Stand and warn. So we see from this the importance of knowledge, we see from this the importance of spirituality and worship, and we see the importance from this of action. Of action. And there are many different ways. We attain this foundation and we may put effort in different areas. Everyone has to have a basic foundation of knowledge. Everyone has to have a basic foundation of spirituality. Everyone has to have a basic foundation of action. And then from there, different people emphasize different things. Some people don't be really into learning. Some people don't be really into worship. They're the one you see them in the masjid every single time. They're the one in Ramadan, they're making qiyam, they're making tarawih every single night. They don't miss a day. Right? These are the people that are dedicated to worship. Then you see the third category of people, they're the people who are dedicated to action. They're the ones who are going out, they're trying to invite people to Islam, they're checking on people who are ill, they're teaching whatever they know to whoever might be able to receive it, they're going out and they're giving charity to those who are in need, they're helping the people. They're helping the people in the actions of everyday life, that they're going to live it in this world. So this then gives us the foundation. Why are all three of them important? Because, and the thing about anything that has three legs is that it's very stable. Right? So if you imagine like a stool, the most basic foundation of a stool is going to be three legs. And if it has three legs, it'll be very strong. Someone can sit on it, it'll be okay. If you look at a stool and you were to take out one of the legs, I only have two legs on the stool. Some people, they're going to be able to sit on the stool, some people they're not. They'll probably fall over. Take out another leg, you only have one leg on the stool now. Right? So now the stool is very tricky. Only the most talented of people are going to be able to stay on the stool. Same thing applies to these kind of concepts. You might have people that are like, no, I'm only going to do worship. Okay, you can only do worship, but it's very likely that you're going to fall into some sort of excess. And the way that you worship, and the way that you do it, so on and so forth. You can do just knowledge, but if you do just knowledge, you're going to probably end up being overly intellectual, and you get really dry. This is not the way, actually, that these scholars of Islam, they're so incredible, because they're the most intellectually advanced people, and at the same time, they're really beautiful, and they're fun to be around, and you feel like a spirituality to them. They're not dry people, right? So the leg, it can't have one leg. You can do just a bunch of action. I'm so active, I'm so involved, but if you don't have the knowledge and the spirituality to inform that action, then the action's probably going to go in the wrong place. So all three of these then become the foundation for how is it that I go towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at various times, maybe I might emphasize one or the other, but in the overall picture, all of them have to be present. And if they're not, then I'll find myself in some sort of imbalance that needs to be rectified. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq and to accept from us our deeds. Oh Allah, we turn towards you and we ask you to forgive us of our sins and our shortcomings, to accept from us our deeds, to give us knowledge that benefits us and to benefit us from that which you have given us, Ya Rabbil Alameen. We ask you, Allah, to help us to reach the month of Ramadan. We ask you, Allah, to help us to reach the month of Ramadan. We ask you, Allah, to give us long lives of worship and of service and of obedience, Ya Allah. We ask you, Allah, to give food to the hungry, to give shelter to the shelterless, to give victory to the oppressed, to give aid to those who are suffering, and to bring our hearts back to life. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا واسرافنا في امرنا وثبت اقدامنا، اللهم بارك فينا وبيننا والف بين قلوبنا وصفوفنا، اللهم كن معنا ولا تكن علينا، وانصر اخواننا المستضعفين في كل مكان، افتح علينا فتح يا عليم، اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا صالحا، اللهم تقبل منا واعف عنا، وآتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار، وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم، وأقم الصلاة.